I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, iPhone mania as Bloomberg gets the scoop on Apple's highly anticipated 10th anniversary handset. Plus, Mark Cuban flips on Bitcoin after calling the digital currency a bubble. The tech billionaire and outspoken skeptic is now a believer. So are digital currencies officially becoming a mainstream investment? And Facebook is losing teenage friends. A new report says more of them are logging on to Instagram and Snapchat instead. Is the world's largest social media network losing its cool? We'll discuss. First, though, the battle for your attention in the smartphone realm is heating up. Last week, we showed you the new smartphone from Android co-founder Andy Rubin called Essential. And tomorrow, it's Samsung's turn in the spotlight. Samsung is expected to announce its new Galaxy Note 8, complete with a display that covers the whole device and an improved camera. You may recall the previous Note 7 was plagued by overheating batteries, which led to a global recall that cost the company more than $6 billion. But the latest edition of the smartphone that started it all, the 10th anniversary edition of Apple's iPhone, is still shrouded in secrecy, or perhaps not so much thanks to Bloomberg Tech's Mark Gurman, who has just published a look at what to expect from Apple's flagship product. And of course, you've been leaking out these details over the last year and a half or so. But now that we're just a few weeks away, what's going to be new?
A lot. So for the first time, they're going to have 3 new phones. The big phone is going to be this premium model that has stainless steel, glass in the front and the back. And as we said here many times before, it's essentially going to be the size of the iPhone 7 Plus's screen, but that's the whole phone. There's no bezels around it on the top or bottom. It's just very slim around there. It'll be easier to hold, not be as heavy. And the 3D sensor for unlocking the phone instead of the fingerprint scanner is going to be the quote-unquote crown jewel of this product.
Let's talk about the 3D face scanner. It'll unlock the phone in milliseconds. It can even do it in the dark. Tell me more.
That's right. So there's 2 lenses on the front. There's the 3D scanning sensor itself, plus an infrared sensor, sort of the technology that you can use on a classic remote control to control your TV. And what the laser does is it creates this light, so it's sort of like in the dark mode. I imagine like being in a place like you're on a SWAT team and you have the helmet where you can see in the dark. So it's kind of like that. So the phone could be on the table. You pick it up, take it out of your pocket. It knows it's you because it has a wide-angle 3D sensor. Just unlocks, like you said, in a few hundred milliseconds.
Now, when it comes to some of the features, Apple is lagging, right? When it comes to the OLED screen, for example. I did sit down with Tim Cook back in June, and he had this today to say about being first. Take a listen.
For us, it's not about being first. It's about being the best and giving the user an experience that delights them every time. And so we don't let that impatience result in shipping something that's just not great.
Talk about the features when it comes to Apple. Which features are Apple first in, and which is Apple behind?
And you can apply what Tim Cook said in your amazing interview from June to any of their recent products. In fact, it was the opening line of this story. So the OLED screen, something that's been appearing in Samsung phones because of their vertical integration. They make the screens and the phones themselves for upwards of 5 years. Yeah. Motorola has had them. HTC has had them. The slimmer bezels, the Essential phone that we had on this show the other day has them. Samsung has had it. What's new? The 3D sensor is going to be new and innovative. The App Store, of course, that's something that they, created. You saw the Android Marketplace, Google Play, everything come after that. And don't forget, Apple was the company that popularized the modern smartphone in 2007 at the beginning. Right,
and also when it comes to processor speed, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Apple has been first.
Right, I remember in 2013, I think a couple months before that, I said this iPhone 5S is going to have this 64-bit chip. And there were so many articles at the time saying there's no way they're going to do that. Apple's not that ahead. But, it was correct. They came out with the 64-bit chip with the 5S in 2013. And they're still years ahead of the competition in processors.
Let's also talk about the home button. It'll be a virtual home button. You get more on-screen real estate. What does this mean?
That's right. So to make the phone smaller, they have to chop off things, right? So the first thing that's going is the home button. They're getting rid of it. It's going to be in the screen, sort of like on the Google Pixel, the Essential phone, but it's actually going to have this home button area. So there's going to be like unique controls in there to do other things. There's going to be some new swiping gestures for navigating between apps. So it's basically moving everything into the screen to the point where you don't really need to click buttons around it. There'll still be the power button. It's going to be longer now to have an easier time clicking with your thumb and the volume buttons, but maybe those will go away in the future too.
Now, obviously, the Note is also coming out. How does this stack up to the competition, whether it's Samsung or Essential?
Well, I think the Note 8 is very significant because of the Note 7, actually. I know we laugh about it, but the Note 7 was one of the highest reviewed phones when it first came out. It was one of the most anticipated and successful phones in terms of the product reviews, but then it started exploding, and that changed everything. So if they get the Note 8 right, it doesn't have a glitch like an exploding battery. I think that's going to be a serious challenger to people's eyeballs for the upcoming year of the smartphone launches.
So what do we know about timing? This new iPhone, whatever it's called, has been dogged by production, rumors that they've had some struggles there. What do we know?
Traditionally, when Apple has supply chain issues or a hard time pumping out a lot of the phones, they'll release it anyways, but they'll release more of the models that they have more supply of, obviously. So there's going to be 3 models. Initially, the mix is going to be much higher for the new updates of the 7 and 7 Plus. We'll see the Pro model, the more expensive one, probably trickle out, but it's going to be hard to find for the first couple months of release.
All right, Mark Gurman, keeping us honest, as always, our Bloomberg Tech reporter who covers consumer technology. Thanks so much. Well, Verizon is taking the fight to its rivals like T-Mobile when it comes to lower price unlimited data plans. The telecom giant said to unveil a new 2-tiered unlimited data plan. It starts at $75 a month to $85 for customers wanting HD video. This will replace Verizon's popular $80 a month plan. The move is set to help Verizon compete with T-Mobile, which offers a similar $70 to $80 a month unlimited data plan. Coming up, Salesforce releases its second quarter earnings. Will the company's AI strategy pay off? We'll dig into the numbers. This is Bloomberg. Salesforce reporting better than expected second quarter earnings. The company raised its revenue forecast for the fiscal year, but shares are falling in extended trading, down about 2% right now. Competition is ramping up from companies like Microsoft and Oracle and cloud services. The Salesforce call has just started. We will bring you the headlines as they cross. With us now from New York, Anurag Rana of Bloomberg Intelligence. So Anurag, what's the main takeaway when you look at the numbers right now?
I think overall a very good quarter. You'd see, almost all the divisions did very well. Even their largest division, Sales Cloud, the growth accelerated. I think there is some confusion about billing guidance for next quarter. But if you look at it, I think the street was looking at billings growth of about 18%. This quarter, it came to around 27, 28. And I think next quarter, it's not as strong. But if you look at a company like Salesforce right now, there's a lot more seasonality in their business. Like any large software company, a lot more deals close in the fourth quarter with larger clients, and I think you would see a shift of revenue. That's what you're seeing here.
Does that mean they are going to be facing the same sort of headwinds that even bigger companies like an Oracle or a Microsoft might face?
Typically, as you get larger, you have much larger clients that buy multiple products from you. So instead of looking at, one product at a time, you're looking at a whole suite of products. And, with those relationships, you actually get a lot more seasonality as you get bigger.
So talk to us about the AI strategy that we mentioned going into the break. How is that working out for Salesforce?
Those things are just starting, and when you look at the entire cloud applications area, AI is going to be one area which is going to differentiate these companies going forward. This is where you can take a whole lot of data that's already on your platform and make sense out of it. And with Salesforce, it's just the starting. I mean, they're just building that product right now. That's going to take several quarters to show actual results in terms of sales growth.
Let's talk about the competition. Of course, Microsoft bought LinkedIn. You've got analysts out there saying that this is the biggest competitive threat for Salesforce. How well positioned is Salesforce to weather that kind of competition?
It'll be very interesting to see what Microsoft does with the LinkedIn combination and what kind of products are emerging. One would have thought their growth rate would have slowed down in terms of, just even their largest cloud offering. But in the last 2 or 3 quarters, we're seeing actually sales accelerate, and which just tells us that corporate spending is good. And software is one area where you're seeing a lot more of the spending dollars go as people pull back from, areas such as hardware or services.
You know, we talk a lot about the cloud and how it is only expanding, and therefore it is anyone's game, whether it's, you know, Microsoft or Google or Amazon. Where does Salesforce sort of fit into this bigger picture in such rapidly expanding yet uncharted territory?
See, when you look at a company like Salesforce, they dominate the cloud applications market. So if you look at, total cloud revenue of about, let's say, $100 billion or so from IDC, you would say 65–70% of that is cloud applications. And Salesforce, by and large, is the biggest company in it. And the rest of the group, whether it's Oracle, whether it's SAP, whether it's Microsoft, they're all playing catch up in it.
All right, Anurag Rana of Bloomberg Intelligence will continue to monitor any headlines from the call. Anurag, as always, thank you. Well, since going public in June, Blue Apron has lurched from one setback to another. The latest challenge, the meal delivery startup is losing its human resources chief and starting a hiring freeze. The company also fired part of its recruiting team, totaling 14 people. The shakeup comes just as the company ramps up a new fulfillment center that is supposed to handle half its production volume. Jing Cao broke the story for Bloomberg Tech and joins us now live from New York. So, Jing, what more can you tell us?
Sure. So this is just another speed bump, I think, for Blue Apron. You know, they've had a really tough time as a public company so far. They've been overshadowed by Amazon. The news just hasn't been good. In their first earnings report, they had to cut their outlook for the rest of the year. They're not going to hit that $1 billion revenue goal for the full year. And now, they're putting on a hiring freeze that just suggests cost cutting. And, we don't know what's going to happen with them for the long term.
Shares are down dramatically since the IPO. Your story details some pretty dismal working conditions, and you also report that 20 or 30 people are leaving every week. I mean, that sounds like pretty aggressive turnover.
In the warehouses, it's a low-skill type of work environment. It's really cold in there. I've done a tour in there. It's understandable that people aren't necessarily happy, even with higher pay. And they're dealing with right now having to move over from Jersey City to Linden, and they're trying to get as many people from Jersey City to Linden as possible, and now people are looking at a much longer commute. Attrition rates right now are atrocious. Blue Apron says that it's due to the shift over, but just broadly speaking, in the entire warehouse industry, turnover is a problem.
And yet they've got these ambitious plans to broaden their fulfillment operations, offer a wider selection of products. This as Amazon is preparing to buy Whole Foods. What's the outlook on whether Blue Apron can actually accomplish these things?
That is actually the biggest question right now, right? Blue Apron offers meal kits. Is this a huge opportunity in groceries? We don't know that yet, and that is what analysts and investors are trying to figure out right now. And honestly, for Blue Apron, they don't have the capital that Amazon has, and they're going to have to figure out, exactly how to spend their money wisely so that they can keep operations going and try to prove that they have a place to play in the bigger food market.
All right, great scoop from you, Jing Cao of Bloomberg Technology. Thanks so much for that reporting. Coming up, after hitting new records last week, Bitcoin prices are pulling back, but interest in digital currencies is going strong, with one famous investor jumping into the scene. We will explain next. And a reminder about our interactive TV function. Find it at TV Go on the Bloomberg. You can watch us live. If you miss an interview, you can go back to it. You can send our producers a message and play with the charts we bring you on air. This is for Bloomberg subscribers only. Check it out at TV Go. Outspoken billionaire Mark Cuban apparently thinks there is opportunity in cryptocurrency after all. Cuban, who tweeted in June that Bitcoin was in a bubble, is now investing in a fund called One Confirmation. The fund will invest in blockchain companies. Cuban tells Bloomberg in an email, "I have always looked at blockchain as a foundation platform from which great applications can be built. Hopefully, we can find a few." For more detailed conversation on digital currencies, let's get to Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde in London. Caroline?
Emily, thank you very much indeed. Yes, I'm joined by Ben Brabyn. He is the head of Level 39, one of Europe's biggest fintech and cybersecurity accelerators, with over 200 member companies in the heart of London's Canary Wharf. Ben, wonderful to have you with us.
Pleasure to join you.
I'm going to take you to a chart, first of all, using the trusty Bloomberg. BTV 2048. If you type that into your Bloomberg, you can currently see that the calls we are getting on Bitcoin don't end currently where we're trading. We're not at the $4,000 mark. We can see it going as high as $6,000. So says Pantera Capital, Fundstrat Global, GFI Group. Are we in a bubble, like Mr. Cuban says?
I think we're in a bubble. Yes, I think that's a very fair analysis of the position we're in.
What is sparking this? What do you think the people that you're talking to, some of the fintech and startup companies that are working within blockchain as well, why are they feeding this euphoria?
Well, I think it's really important to separate out the Bitcoin technology, beg your pardon, the Bitcoin currency from the blockchain technology underlying it. And of course, blockchain has enormous and transformational potential. And much of the interest in that is finding its expression in the valuation of Bitcoin. But I think what we're seeing is a galloping ahead of the interest in the technology manifesting in the price of Bitcoin. And
not only in the price of Bitcoin, but also in Ethereum, Ripple, but it's also tempting a lot of companies to come out and raise funds in this novel new way of ICOs, initial coin offerings. You write a white paper and within minutes you're able to go to the crowd and raise millions. Is this something we're seeing fintechs in Europe adopt as well as we've seen in the United States?
Well, there's certainly huge engagement with ICOs, token sales, and I think, of course, the SEC in the United States has clarified its view on this recently. The Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, I think, is also taking a keen interest and is keen to make sure that it encourages innovation while making sure it protects the markets and the consumers. The real potential, I think, of ICOs is very exciting, but it comes with health risk. It's an extreme sport.
Extreme sport. And so, therefore, do you think that we will start to see the UK regulations come in and say, look, these are going to be asset securities that we want to be regulated, that we want to be registered in the same way that the SEC has?
Well, the FCA has been consulting on this over the last few months, and I think they are really they haven't declared a clear position looking forward just yet, but they are very clearly, of course, prioritising protection of the market and the consumer, while seeking to do everything they can to encourage innovation. And that is one of their key strengths as the sort of the superhero, really, of fintech in the UK. The FCA is keen to make sure it supports innovation and helps the UK retain and develop its position as a great place to innovate in cryptocurrency.
And what's interesting about Level 39 is, of course, you're a hub for startups, but you're slap bang in the middle of where Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan or HSBC is based here in London as well. How much are you seeing the banking sector respond to the rise of blockchain technology and companies that are being born out of it?
I think that's a really great question. And of course, the actual application of these technologies into the great financial institutions of the world that you've described and mentioned is it's a long and complex process. So you have to look carefully, you have to listen, and you have to look for the people who are building deep relationships. Of course, that's what we seek to support in Level 39. It's not a dramatic activity. It involves really drilling into the detail of how distributed ledger technology can transform the way in which these great institutions operate.
How can it change the way they operate?
Well, I think, of course, if you consider at the heart of DLT, the distribution of trust across networks, the fundamental transformation, and many people compare this to the early stages of the internet. And I think there's a comparison that's useful because much of the interest in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies right now, of course, looks a little bit like the hype that surrounded the internet in the mid to late 1990s. But in just the same way, the fundamental transformational potential is probably as hard to see in full now as it was in 1995 as people consider the future of the internet. I think
that was an interesting point that Mark Cuban really made out, that from the ashes of some of these bubbles, like with Bitcoin, you will see the ICOs, the digital currency versions of Amazon, Google, Facebook come to be the real game changers. Where will they be based? Will they be in San Francisco? Will they be in London? Will they be in Zug? Because that's certainly Switzerland's trying to claim precedent in terms of the crypto, what do they call themselves? I think Crypto Valley.
Well, there is a huge amount of innovation, and we can look further afield as well. If we look in China, if we look in Russia and Japan, also great innovation in cryptocurrency. So I think we should be ready to be unsurprised about where the real progress arrives. But of course, it's also important to look beyond cryptocurrencies and consider, for example, the implications of smart contracts. There are some very exciting developments which are also built on the same essential foundation.
There's been questions as to whether one digital currency will win out overall. Do you believe that one will, or can we have many?
Well, I think we're probably going to have many. If you look at the governance debates and indeed the technology debates, which have been shaping the recent development, particularly of Bitcoin, but I don't think any major currency is immune to this. Governance is a real challenge, and scaling is a real challenge. So it is unlikely that one standard will emerge. And of course, it's systemically useful to have real diversity of currency, just as it's useful to have diversity in almost every other.
And what's interesting is also government interaction between yourself and Level 39. Are you discussing with government how they should be adopting and looking at cryptocurrency space and indeed the broader remit? You were someone who used to work with the UKTI, getting startups connected with investment. Are you saying, look, ICOs could be the way for companies to finance themselves going forward?
Well, I think the government already does a fantastic job, and the FCA in particular as the regulator does a great job of balancing the challenges of maintaining protections for markets and indeed for consumers, while also really being as permissive as is consistent with that. And it's the envy of regulators around the world, and I've certainly seen plenty of evidence in my travels. As far as the as central government is concerned, I think that there is no doubt in any of the minds, certainly that I've been engaging with, that developing the UK's huge advantage as a great place to innovate is at the forefront of their minds.
Despite Brexit. Ben Brabyn, wonderful to have you with us, of course. That was head of Level 39. Emily.
All right, Caroline Hyde for us there in London. Thanks, Caroline. Coming up, is Facebook's copycat strategy paying off? One industry research group cautions that the highly sought-after teen user base could be waning. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. A top U.S. commander says the first wave of additional troops will begin arriving in Afghanistan within days or weeks. The announcement comes less than 24 hours after President Trump outlined the administration's strategy for the war. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is signaling the recent United Nations Security Council resolution imposing new sanctions on North Korea appears to be having an effect. He noted that since the vote, there have been no new missile launches and no provocative actions.
I am pleased to see that the regime in Pyongyang has certainly demonstrated some level of restraint that we've not seen in the past.
Secretary Tillerson added, perhaps we are seeing our pathway to some time in the near future, having some dialogue. The State Department's warning American citizens about traveling to parts of Mexico. That's as officials say homicides are on the rise at resorts popular with American tourists and murders across the country. Officials say turf wars between rival gangs are pushing the spike in violence. Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull's government could be running on borrowed time. That's if a court rules 3 of its lawmakers with dual citizenship are ineligible to hold office. A 117-year-old law bars dual nationals from parliamentary positions. The hearings start tomorrow. South Korea has rejected the U.S.'s proposal to revise their trade deal. The Trump administration has called the 5-year agreement a, quote, job killer and has asked to implement changes to address the trade imbalance. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. here in New York, 7:30 Wednesday morning in Sydney. My colleague Paul Allen has a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Well, we're seeing some positivity after a reasonable lead from the U.S. equities. Nikkei futures are higher. Japan manufacturing PMI for August and machine tool orders for July will be out later there. Here in Australia, another busy day for earnings. Woolworths, the retailer, will be out with full-year results, expecting a profit there of $1.5 billion. The stock had something of a resurgence since the CEO, Brad Banducci's been in charge over the past 18 months. Also, the gaming company Star Entertainment out with the results, expecting full-year earnings there to contract to $217 million. And Air New Zealand's just reported net income of $382 million and expecting to grow capacity next year. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Well, funding for artificial intelligence startups has surged more than 8-fold since 2012. And both entrepreneurs and venture capitalists are rushing to capitalize on machine learning. The AI startup Databricks did just that, closing a Series D round of $140 million. Its backers include Silicon Valley heavyweights like Andreessen Horowitz, NEA, and Battery Ventures. Joining us now, CEO and co-founder of Databricks, Ghodsi. Ali, thank you so much for joining us. Now, the way I understand it is your company, if you're not Google or Facebook, your company helps provide AI tools that startups might have trouble providing on their own. Is that right?
Absolutely, that's exactly it.
So tell us a little bit more about how it works.
Yeah, so the way it works is what we're seeing out there. I mean, we have over 500 customers, and we're seeing that there's a big gap. Everybody's talking about how AI is taking over and so successful. But what they don't tell you is that only 1% of the companies are actually successful with this technology. The rest of the Fortune 2000, they see the huge potential it has, but they're struggling with it. And the reason they're struggling with it is they don't have 20,000 engineers to focus on this problem. And there's, frankly, 3 problems they have to attack. One is a people problem. So if you're solving cancer diagnosis with AI, you probably need medical doctors involved, and they need to collaborate with the data scientists. So that's the first problem. The second problem they have to attack is the process problem. They have to stitch together lots of software to get AI working today. And finally, there's an infrastructure problem of managing thousands of machines. And we've built a unified analytics platform that addresses this very problem.
Now, I recently spoke to Nikesh Arora, formerly of Google and SoftBank, and I asked him about how the competition in AI is shaping up, and he said, I think the AI conversation is clear as mud, meaning it's early days, a lot of unknowns. How would you describe the competition among the biggest tech giants?
Yeah, I mean, the competition is fierce, but you should really look at the problems that people are having. And I actually think many of the key problems are not being addressed by anyone. The people problem, for instance, the collaboration between the different people in the same organization that have to solve this AI problems, there is really nothing out there. So that's one problem, for instance. I also think there's too much software engineering, stitching together of software that you have to do. People are not attacking these problems. So for that reason, there's a huge demand out there, and that's why they're turning to our technology.
So how exactly can you be something for everyone if it's so complicated and requires so much manpower?
Our focus is just to simplify that as much as possible. It's assumed this technology was developed by the big companies, right? Companies like Google, they have 30,000 engineers, many of them PhDs. They've been focusing on this problem. So they take a lot of things for granted. They just assume it's really easy to do this and that. But other companies, it's not so easy. So what we're doing is we're just taking that tech that Google has, automating it and simplifying it, and then bringing it to the rest of Fortune 2000.
Elon Musk has painted a very doomsday scenario when it comes to the future of AI. Mark Zuckerberg, on the other hand, has said that's pretty irresponsible. What do you think?
I think that the potential of AI is huge. We're not looking at replacing human beings. We're not trying to build, we're not even going in that direction. So I think the chances of those doomsday scenarios happening are very, very slim. There are way bigger risks out there in society. I mean, this technology is amazing. What our customers like Viacom, HP, Salesforce, what they're doing is amazing. I mean, some of them are looking at, some of our customers are looking at coming up with better drugs, curing diseases. It's fantastic. So I don't share Elon Musk's view.
AI startups got $560 million in funding 5 years ago. Last year, it was $5 billion in funding. Is there any chance we're in an AI bubble?
No, I actually think in the next 10, 20, 30 years, there's going to be so many use cases. Automation is not going to end. I don't think there's going to be a hype around it. I mean, for instance, in many parts of the world, we have an aging problem where the population is old, and the young generation, there isn't enough people to take care of the old. Here, again, AI can help automate things in government, in healthcare, and elsewhere. So the potential is massive. It's just not that easy to do it. People take that for granted. So you have to bridge that gap, and that's what we're trying to do.
All right, Ali Ghodsi, co-founder and CEO of Databricks. Ali, thanks so much for stopping by. Well, this year, Facebook is expected to see a decline among teen users in the U.S. eMarketer predicts 14.5 million people from the ages of 12 to 17 will use Facebook in 2017. That's over a 3% drop from the year before. This is the first time the research company has predicted a fall in Facebook usage for any group. Teens are migrating instead to Snapchat and Instagram, which of course is owned by Facebook. But will Snap be able to capitalize on this potential weak spot? Joining us now, our Bloomberg Tech reporter, Sarah Fryer. So I feel like we've been talking about this potential for years, and now we're finally seeing a number that might lead us to believe that teen users are actually going to drop on Facebook. Let's start with Snapchat. This is actually the first bit of good news Snapchat has heard in a while, right?
We've seen the stock climb today after a long, drawn-out fall since the IPO. And one of the main reasons, of course, that Snap has fallen is because Facebook has been copying its most popular features on its main app and on Instagram. And you know, this company continues to be very compelling to a lot of young people, and that's what this report reminds us of. You know, it is still a lot cooler than the big social network is.
So how much of a concern do you think this actually is for Facebook, given that they own Instagram? Is it still a big problem if they're losing teen users?
Well, when I talk to teens who use Facebook, and a lot of them do, they use it for things that are more like responsibilities or utilities. They use it to coordinate their soccer matches, work on group projects with people from their Spanish class. I mean, it's the kind of thing that you kind of have to be on to survive in high school and college in a social setting with your teachers and all. And so it is more of a tool. It's not
like a utility.
It's not fun. And the way that teens are communicating, they're communicating in images, they're communicating in video. It's less the kind of status updates that we've seen on Facebook, which have become maybe increasingly political or increasingly heavy. This more light communication that we see on Instagram and Snap. So does it harm Facebook? I think Facebook made a really smart bet a few years ago when acquiring Instagram, and that's certainly become so crucial to their future. And so I'd love to see a little bit more color from the company in the future of exactly how much Instagram contributes.
Now, when it comes to Snap, you've got NBC doing a show now on Snapchat. CNN is now doing a daily show on Snapchat. How much traction are these kinds of things actually getting?
They're getting a lot of traction, like millions of viewers. It's very interesting. I mean, this kind of media consumption experience differs from Facebook in several ways. But first of all, it's mobile first. Second of all, it's in these short bites that people can really consume on the go. And it's something that caters to this very millennial audience that is increasingly not paying for cable, not watching conventional TV. So it's a way for brands like CNN and NBC to actually reach this new generation that may not be on Facebook.
So how well do we think the Facebook copying of Snapchat is actually working? I mean, obviously Instagram has copied some Snapchat features as well, but when it comes to Facebook and making the camera primary and adding stories, is it backfiring?
I wouldn't say yet that it's backfiring. I think with any user base of more than 2 billion people, some people are going to use whatever they create, But I haven't seen people use Facebook stories, at least on my own Facebook. And that's anecdotal. They haven't released any information on it, but I don't know. Have you?
No.
Yeah, it sits
but
there at the top of my mobile app. Maybe we're old, Emily. But it's something that I haven't really seen gain traction. And it was the top thing that Mark Zuckerberg talked about at the F8 developer conference earlier this year. So that part is a little bit embarrassing. The fact that they made such a big deal about how this was the augmented reality platform of the future, and then we haven't seen a lot happen there. But in terms of Instagram, that is going so well. That is an incredibly successful copycat effort.
All right, Sarah Fryer of Bloomberg Tech, thanks so much for stopping by with that update. And reminding me of my age. Coming up, household debt in the U.S. is on the rise, but is it something to worry about? And what tech tools can help you navigate the debt landscape? That is next. This is Bloomberg. In today's Revolving Door, Jeff Jones, the former president of Uber, has been named CEO of H&R Block. Jones left Uber in March after only 6 months at the company. He previously served as chief marketing officer at Target. The move is part of a greater digital push at the tax preparer. H&R Block recently touted a collaboration with IBM for free online returns as it competes with online services like TurboTax. Well, Americans are taking on more debt. Let's take a look at the Bloomberg, and you can see that the levels are getting close to those during the financial crisis a decade ago. It's been 12 consecutive quarters of rising household debt led by increases in mortgages and auto loans. But it's not necessarily a doom and gloom scenario. If you look at the ratio of Americans' household debt to disposable income, you can see that number dropping, which indicates people are more comfortable taking on that extra debt. One of the many fintech companies that is looking to help people navigate their financial futures is NerdWallet. Joining me now here in the studio, CEO Tim Chen. Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So how worried should we be that household debt levels are rising to pre-crisis levels?
Not too worried. We're seeing pretty healthy levels of credit demand and credit issuance. We have a pretty unique vantage point because we issue so many credit products. I don't think credit cycles die of old age. They're generally correlated with a recession, and we're seeing very healthy jobs right now.
And yet non-housing debt is also rising. Car loans, student loans, credit card debt. Headlines like the next credit crisis could be unfolding right under our noses. Is that overblown?
I think so. If you look at the historical default levels on credit card debt, for example, we're still below historical averages. So we're coming out of the trough, but we're still below average.
So talk to us a little bit about what NerdWallet does and how it sort of helps you navigate whether you're going to have an issue or not.
So NerdWallet's mission right now is to help make financial products shoppable. So we think that's a huge financial problem. You can save a ton of money by being able to easily compare the fees and the rates out there, and we make that process possible.
The competition to be a sort of financial guidance one-stop shop is pretty fierce. You've got Credit Karma, Lending Tree, all these different sites. You know, what makes you guys stand out?
So we are relentlessly consumer first. I personally...
Who isn't relentlessly consumer first? Or says so, at least.
I spend so many hours in consumers' living rooms across the country. That is something I think that is super important. Even our journalism team engages in a ton of user testing, and we use that to really iterate on our products and make it more useful.
So you're actually visiting the homes of people across the country?
Absolutely.
Tell me about that.
Some of the stories are really amazing. I think one of the stories that hasn't been told is just the story of volatility. So many employers are pushing business volatility onto wages. So month to month, most of America is seeing volatility. And when you combine income volatility with expense volatility, that explains a lot of demand for the short-term credit that people are seeing.
Now, you've got an interesting story. I know you've actually pulled a lot of people from Wall Street to work at the company.
That's right.
How is that working out?
I think those are some of the most analytical people, and we've got them cranking away at some of these analyses. So you take something quite simple like how much home can I afford, and it really helps putting that quantitative mindset, finding the drivers that matter, and presenting that to users in a simple way.
So who are these? Are former bankers, former Goldman Sachs? Who are they?
That's right. We've got a lot of ex-hedge fund analysts, a lot of ex-consultants, and yeah, these are people that I pulled from my social network while I was bootstrapping NerdWallet the first 6 years of our existence.
Is the political environment and political uncertainty, is that impacting any of the people that you're talking to?
Not a ton. I think it's not having a huge impact on credit demand as far as we can tell right now.
So when you look ahead, what are going to be the biggest issues when it comes to the fintech landscape, even amidst, you know, political uncertainty, potential tax reform, all that?
Right. Well, I think people are doing an amazing job building a better mousetrap in many different areas, whether it's robo-advisors, peer-to-peer lending, et cetera. What we're seeing now is a lot of the incumbents, like Goldman Sachs and all of the asset managers, are stealing these ideas and incorporating them into their workflows. And so that's creating a lot of confusion. So there's just a proliferation of choice, and that's where I think there's a huge need for a review and comparison system like NerdWallet to help out consumers.
All right, Tim Chen, CEO of NerdWallet, thanks so much for stopping by. Great to have you. All right, right now, President Trump is in Arizona. He is in Yuma for a rally this evening, set to speak in Phoenix, actually, at a Make America Great Again rally, 10 p.m. New York time. You're looking at a live shot of the president there meeting with Marines. He's been touring Customs and Border Patrol equipment and hangars out there. We will bring you a live report next. This is Bloomberg. President Trump has arrived in Arizona to meet with his supporters at a Make America Great Again rally later tonight. The visit caps off a tumultuous few weeks, to say the least, at the White House. So will the rally be a reset for the president? Joining us now, Kevin Cirilli, our chief Washington correspondent in Washington. So, Kevin, certainly it's an opportunity for a reset, but will it be a reset? Is that what the president wants?
You know what, Em? I'm not going to bet that this is what the president wants. Look, we've seen this time and time again. Every time President Trump's back is up against a political wall, he comes out swinging and bulldozing. This is, however, the first time that he's going to really be speaking with his core constituency supporters in the political battleground of Arizona. You'll remember back on the campaign trail when protesters would shut down highways, and it was a very contentious battleground state, so to speak, simply because this is really ground zero of the immigration issue. Now, while last night in the president's first primetime address, he spoke about national foreign policy, adding 4,000 additional troops to the already 8,600 troops on the ground in Afghanistan. That was really perhaps the first time he was speaking to the broader country since the criticism following Charlottesville. But tonight, he's all about talking to the base.
All right, you're looking at live pictures of the president in Yuma meeting with Marines. He will be off to Phoenix momentarily. Kevin, what are you going to be listening for in the president's speech?
Two things. First and foremost, that tone, that rhetoric. Is he trying to continue on with this unification message, trying to unite folks? Or is he going to be more combative, talking more in the nationalistic style that we saw advocated by now former chief strategist Steve Bannon? But the second thing I'm going to be looking for is all about policy, particularly immigration, because we've been carefully tracking here in Washington about just how they're going to have tax policy, the debt limit in September, all of these other wonky things. But we haven't heard much of what we've heard from then candidate Trump on the campaign trail about some type of immigration plan. He's already advocating for there to be additional ICE officers or immigration control officers. That, of course, has sparked some controversy from several immigration activist groups, including Democrats. So how specific he gets in terms of immigration policy, we'll have to wait and see. We should also note that NAFTA talks are underway, and the U.S.-Mexico border bolstering of that wall, the wall, we haven't heard that in a while. But that, of course, could also come up later today when he's in Phoenix as well.
What about when it comes to taxes? Political, of course, has been reporting that some common ground has been found when it comes to tax reform, that a major tax reform announcement could be imminent. What's the latest?
So Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, as well as Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, were in Louisville, Kentucky earlier this week talking about tax policy. They, of course, have been working with top administration officials as well as top Republican congressional lawmakers. Here's where it gets interesting, because the far right of the conservative wing, the House Freedom Caucus in Congress, is advocating for there to be some type of offset in terms of budget negotiations, which has direct implications for tax reform later on in the month of September, October. What does that mean? Put simply, if you're out in Silicon Valley, if you're looking at tech investments, it really means whether or not they can have comprehensive tax reform or just some type of corporate tax reform. Everyone that I'm talking with in Washington is really leaning toward the latter. They think that they could get some corporate tax reform. They're a little more pessimistic on the issue of comprehensive tax reform by the end of the year. But hey, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin is very optimistic about this still.
All right, Kevin Cirilli, our chief Washington correspondent, live report there. Thanks so much, Kevin. Again, you're looking at live pictures of President Trump speaking to Marines in Yuma, Arizona. He is off to a rally in Phoenix. Just a couple of hours now, a Make America Great Again rally and an opportunity to be a reset for the administration. We'll see if it actually is. that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Thanks so much for watching. Reminder, we are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.